I have known so many weirdos in my life. I like to think it's because I have a welcoming personality. Other people just feel comfortable around me. It's been great for meeting some amazing people who might otherwise be too shy. But weirdos also feel comfortable telling me all about themselves. This lady was a failed actress who lived in the same apartment complex. She was about to turn 50, and I only know that because she told me what years she graduated high school and college. But she could totally have passed for 30. I think she just took really good care of herself. I remember she said she was really into horror movies and she used to collect memorabilia, like posters, signed photos, costumes, and props, stuff like that. She invited me over a lot to show me her collections. I always put it off. I felt kind of bad though. This lady seemed a little lonely since she lived by herself, and I think she just wanted someone to talk to. It was kind of like an aunt who always wants to host you. I felt bad always saying no. Then one day, I finally said yes to breakfast on Saturday. She made scrambled eggs and French toast. It was actually really sweet. We first sat in her living room where I could see the decorations. There were posters, signed photos, and other random decorations that I couldn't really identify. But you know which decoration stood out the most? Skulls. She had shelves attached to the walls in her living room, and the shelves had skulls. The skulls had many different shapes, like some had horns, long teeth, super long beaks, etc. None of them looked anything like human skulls. I had never been in a room with so many clearly visible skulls before. It felt really awkward for me, and it killed my appetite. I still ate though. This lady had been inviting me over for forever, and she had just made me a whole breakfast. I was trying to tell myself, like, okay, just smile, nod, and eat. She's going to show you her collection, and then never come back. After we ate, she started showing me around her bedrooms. She had skulls everywhere on display. It was a 3-bedroom apartment, and all of them were full of decorations. She lived by herself. When I saw so many skulls in the same room, they started to look similar. Some skulls were easy to identify, but I couldn't tell a cow skull apart from a pig skull. All these skulls were clearly not shaped like human heads until we got to one bedroom. The skulls in that room looked kind of like humans. That totally freaked me out. I asked her, "What animal are these?" She laughed and said, "Humans," and then, "Just kidding." I was like, thank God, but then she added, "Well, kind of." I literally lost my breath, and my chest was hurting. I don't know that much about different species, but I think these ones looked so much like human heads since this room was for different primates. That day, I learned what a bonobo is because one of her skulls was from a bonobo. I would have guessed that one was human. I get that some people collect bones and stuff, but if you invite someone over, maybe mention your skull collection first. Just a heads up. I would bet she probably has at least a few real human skulls in that collection. Sometimes you just know. I'm not sure if this part is relevant, but she had been divorced 4 times. This whole story still gives me the creeps. I feel a little out of breath every time I tell it. I am a teenager who helps his dad out on the allotment. If you don't know, an allotment is like a mini farm. You can plant veggies, have animals like chickens or rabbits to care for, etc. This happened recently, and this still creeps me out. In the evening, my dad says we need to go to the allotment to feed our chickens as he forgot to feed them earlier that day. It was around 8 p.m. when I agreed and went in the car and started driving. When we got to our allotment, which is like a 15-minute drive, it was already dark outside. Not a lot, but dark. I opened the gates to the allotment, let my dad drive in, and then closed them. As I was about to though, I saw a black car outside. The car belonged to a guy that used to be chill with my dad, but they both kind of fell off from talking to each other. My dad said he was becoming more mentally ill as the guy had a divorce and got his kids taken by the mother. The guy lives on the allotment now, even sleeping there. Remember, there's other people too on this allotment area, around 20 other ones. But there was no one else except me, dad, and the guy. After my dad parked the car, we got out and started getting the food for the chickens out of the trunk. While my dad was doing that, I looked at his ex-friend's allotment only to see him staring at us. It was dark, so I can only see a shadow of him, but I knew he was staring at us. I had a gut feeling, but I decided to ignore it. We went to the allotment, fed the chickens, and were about to go home until my dad almost forgot about something. He went to the shed at the end of the allotment to fetch something, and I was going to enter, but had a feeling to wait out instead. As I told my dad how much longer till he finds what he needed, I turned back to face our gate being opened. I didn't see it at first, but saw the guy trying to enter our allotment quietly. He stared at me and slowly closed the gate before just disappearing. I didn't react or say anything. I just stood there. I thought of telling my dad, but didn't want to scare him or something. In the end, this isn't a horror movie where I should scream like a girl. When my dad left the shed, now we could go. As we were leaving, we heard a sound like an axe hitting wood non-stop. We knew something was wrong. We quickly walked to our car, started it, and went to the gate. I left the car, creeped out of the guy being around in the allotment. I quickly opened the gate and let my dad drive through. As I was closing the gate, I saw something that terrified me on the spot. The guy was just standing there, 20 meters away from me, looking at me. I couldn't see any details, but just darkness on him. He was holding something in his hand, but then he just moved and went into some bushes. My dad got out of the car to lock the gate. He looked at the bushes through the closed gate and rushed to his car. When we left and started driving, I told my dad if he saw what I saw. He said he saw him hiding in the bushes, squatting, looking at us. Dad said he saw him holding something too, like an axe or knife. We left terrified, but we tried to laugh it off, knowing we were probably close to being attacked, or worse, dead. We came back to the allotment at the same time around 8 p.m. A few days after what happened, we saw the guy's car in the allotment, and we knew we needed to be quick with feeding the chickens. As we did so, everything was going fine, until as we were about to leave. My dad stopped me, and we hid over a blue shed. My dad told me, "He's there, he's in the bushes." My heart dropped. I told my dad where he was, and he said 5-second walk, and we were done. We quickly ran to the car, closed it, and drove off. For a second, I saw him. He had an axe. He wanted to sneak up on us, harm us. He wanted to kill us. I was 19, but easily looked 14 to 16, living with my boyfriend. We had a suite on the 3rd floor of a condo building, and our next-door neighbor was an older cab driver, about 50. He constantly had really young, sketchy-looking women coming and going. We minded our own business, but things got a little weird one day. I was taking groceries in and forgot my keys on the outside of my door for about 3 minutes. I heard a door slam outside, and I suddenly remembered that I forgot the keys, so I went out. They weren't there. The only person whose door we could hear would be the creepy neighbor. We knocked on his door to see if he had them, but he wouldn't answer. My boyfriend was very paranoid and wouldn't let it go, so he called the building security. Security knocked on every single door in the building to ask if someone saw our keys, and the neighbor was the only one who didn't answer. After a long evening of worrying that this creep had our apartment keys, we just changed our locks, which of course was after regular hours, so it was very, very expensive. The next morning, my keys were shoved under our mat. A year later, he was arrested for child pornography possession. So yes, creepy neighbor, let us never meet again. My story happened about 4 years ago. I was a single mom living alone, and my property is out of town a bit. Not in the middle of nowhere, but not close enough to town for walking distance, either. I have a couple of neighbors that I see from time to time, and everyone in my area knows everyone else pretty much. This happened when I was up late one night. I was doing some dishes and cleaning up because my son was in bed for the night. I had let my dog outside to roam the property. I have quite a large field to one side of my home that my dog, Goldie, loves to play and run about in, and I was just humming along with the radio and washing dishes. I go outside to call my dog to the house. She roams to the far end of the property, and it's pretty normal for me to have to call her a few times before she bounds up the yard, and I see a small light in the field that I had never seen before. It looked very much like a flashlight. I was a little creeped out, so I stayed in the lights on my property where my neighbor across the street could see me if he looked out, and it made me feel safer, whether it was justified or not. LOL. I called Goldie 3 times, shouting loud because I didn't want to walk into the dark to find her. I waited a few minutes, listening for her paws thumping on the ground, and I did. I also heard a faint male voice from the direction of the light calling my dog back into the field. At this point, I can see her. She's about halfway between me and the source of the light. I'm getting freaked out, but I also have weapons in my house and a knife on me at all times, and I'm not about to let this fucker hurt my Goldie or myself. I shout at the dog, "Goldie, you get your little butt over here right now." At this point, she realized I was serious and wiggled her little ass over to me, and I rushed into the house with her. I stayed in the house and turned the lights off so that I could see out without people necessarily seeing me inside. I retrieved my handgun from the safe and loaded it and kept it with me as I checked the doors and windows to make sure they were locked and looked out the window on the side of the house to see if the light was still there. I didn't see it when I looked out the window. About 10 minutes had passed at this point since I got in the house. So, I put a low light on in the kitchen and start doing dishes again, this time with my gun on the counter next to me just in case. About 30 minutes pass, and I'm just starting to reach a level of calm when I hear a very loud crash in my garage. Now, in my area, the neighbors look out for me, and I look out for them. So, at this point, I went into the living area and called the neighbor across the street to ask him if he will look out his front window and see if there is anyone outside near my garage. I tell him that I'm going to hit the lights in the garage and push the button in the laundry room to open the door. I have a button on the inside of the house as well as on my car visor. He agrees and seems super concerned. So I creep to the laundry room door that leads into the garage and push the button on the inside of the door. The door opening triggers the garage light to come on. My neighbor immediately freaks the hell out. He tells me there is a man in my garage. At this point, I'm just inside from the garage, and I have a gun in my hand, so I open the door fast. There is a guy in my garage trying really hard and very stupidly to hide by the side of my car. I slowly start to walk around and have my weapon aimed and ready to fire. As I walk around the car, I say, "I know you are over there, and I have a loaded weapon. You are trespassing on private property. This is my residence, and if you don't leave, I will be forced to shoot you." Like a flash, this guy gets up and sprints out of my garage like a cat with its ass on fire, shouting, "I'm just a friendly neighbor." After that, I closed up the garage and checked to see if anything was missing. It wasn't. I found the toolbox he had accidentally knocked over that caused the crash, and it seemed like his clumsiness got him caught before he could snatch any of my things. I notified the police that there was a man in the area who had broken into my garage. From what I saw, he found a way to wedge the small garage window open and squeeze in, and they came out, asked a few questions, and left. I heard about a guy being picked up for the same type of thing a few days later in a nearby area, but I'm not sure if it was him. My friend Sally has had a bad run with neighbors, but this was one of the worst. Sally lives very close to me, about a 10-minute walk. We were both around 14 years old when this happened. We live rural, so we both have a lot of land. Me and Sally decided to go camping on her land. We bought cheap hammocks and went through the bushland. The days prior, we spent clearing some of the razor grass with a cane knife to make a path. We probably should have worn long pants because we ended up with little cuts all over our legs and some on our arms. We set up our hammocks and brought quite a few blankets because it does get pretty cold at night even though you're sweating throughout the day. We were still on her property and hadn't gone to her neighbor's boundary. Her neighbor had just leased the land to new tenants. Me and Sally were sitting on our hammocks talking and laughing. This was around 9 p.m. We heard something in the bush. We just thought it was a wallaby. There's plenty of wallabies around there. Then we could see the figure of a man. We were whispering to each other, trying to see who it was. At first we thought it was her brother. His come and scared us when we were camping previously. Then, as the person got closer, we were thinking it could have been her dad. It was dark and the bush looks the same from every angle. We realized the man was coming from the other direction than her house. We didn't dare move and covered our torches under our blankets. The man came up and said hi and introduced himself as Ben. Now Ben was extremely drunk. He staggered around and he reeked of alcohol. He started saying how we had a nice little camp here and said something pretty unsettling. "I'll have to come out and sunbake naked here on one of these hammocks." Me and Sally gave each other worried looks but didn't say anything. It only got worse from there. I can't remember everything he said because it was a while ago and he was mumbling on for what felt like forever. But some of the things that stuck out were, "I'll have to kill you ass Wolf Creek style," and said, "You're nearly legal then," when he asked us our age. Ben was probably in his 40s. Me and Sally were texting each other while he was talking and coming up with an escape plan. He also offered us a puff on the magic dragon and pulled out a glass pipe. We declined. Sally said that we were leaving back to the house to make food. He told us to come back. We left our blankets and most of the stuff there and legged it. We told her dad what happened and we slept inside. The next morning we went back to our campsite to find everything burnt. A circle with probably a 20 m radius was all burnt. Coming from that circle was a line of burnt grass, going towards the neighbor's house. I'm not a firefighter or do forensics, but it seemed obvious that some kind of fuel was used. Me and Sally were talking, and it dawned on us the possibility that Ben may have thought we were in the hammocks due to the pile of blankets. Ben was definitely drunk enough not to be able to tell the difference. We went and told Sally's dad, who then checked it out, and then went next door. Ben's roommate answered the door and said Ben wasn't home and apologized, and even gave Sally's dad $50 for the blankets and hammocks. Nothing more happened for a few months. Sally told me at school about how Ben had been caught on camera sneaking around her yard. I went to her house after school because she was going to be home alone until her dad finished work. I ended up sleeping over there that night. That's when he came over. Ben was drunk and came out the front of Sally's house and started yelling he accused Sally of stealing his dog. Sally's dad called the police. They arrested him. The next day, we found a knife in the yard. It wasn't from Sally's house. The police came again, and we told them about the knife, and they got the footage from the cameras as well. I don't know what happened to Ben, but he no longer lives next to Sally. So, Ben, let's never meet again. This happened about 2 years ago. In my second year at university, I was 20. For context, I'm French, so if anything's weird about how I describe uni experience, that's why. At the time, I lived in a government-owned apartment building, 3rd floor. My direct neighbor was my younger sister, who was studying in the same university as I did. One other thing important to the story is that I'm disabled. My right leg is useless after an accident when I was 13, and I suffer from debilitating chronic pain to a degree that keeps me bedridden and nonverbal unless I take a twice-a-day dosage of prescribed morphine. All of that is important details, bear with me. When I take my medication, I'm able to leave my bed. On the worst days, I have to either use a wheelchair or a cane to get around. Isn't it great that we lived on the 3rd floor of a building with no elevator? On top of that, as you might guess, morphine is a very strong pain medication. It screws with your visual and hearing perception. It makes you sleepy and dizzy, lessens your reflexes, numbs your nervous system, makes you paranoiac. You get the idea. At the time, I had only been taking morphine for less than 6 months after 10 years of various other pain medication, and I was still dealing with the side effects in full force. Most of them are gone now. So for me, that meant mainly auditory hallucinations, sleepiness, dizziness, and bad reflexes/nervous response. At that point, I had gotten used to hearing stuff that wasn't there, mostly clapping noises, clicking noises, small things ultimately. I never hallucinated human voices. That night, I had gone out to the center of the city to meet with friends. This was a rare occasion for me, and I do mean rare. I didn't go out more than once every 2 months or so, for multiple reasons that my friends, bless them, understood perfectly. Morphine means no drinking, so that's half the fun of going to the bar removed from the start. Despite the very useful nature of the meds, I was still am in a tremendous amount of pain if I stand for more than a couple of minutes, and I was sure to do a lot of that at the bar, plus walking back from the bus stop to my building about a 5 minutes walk. But I went anyway, like I did exceptionally. For a few days, there had been rumors going around about a group that was going around kidnapping people from my uni. From memory, 2 girls had disappeared already, and it was suspected that a blue van was the vehicle used. Those reports were circulating on our majors group and on the unis group as well, about the same details each time, but my friends and I were skeptical, mostly about the blue van, because we didn't believe the van would still be running around if the information had spread enough that we were hearing about it on Facebook. You know? Not that I was thinking about any of that as I came back from the bar, around midnight. Early, I know, but I was in a lot of pain and the bus stops at midnight, and missing it would mean waking up my sister so she could pick me up at the tram station, since I was physically unable to walk the 20 minutes required. I got into the bus. Only 3 people were there, and none got out of my bus stop. Now bear in mind that I was in an extreme amount of pain, so much that my vision was blurring out on the edges, and I was swaying a bit from side to side, trying to minimize the weight being put on my leg. On top of that, I had just taken a fast-working morphine dose to help me get through the 5 minutes walk back to my building, and unlike my twice-a-day high dose, those pills I could take to my discretion whenever I needed a quick relief. The downside of that very practical pill is that it basically knocks you out in 30 minutes. You get so sleepy you can barely keep your eyes open, and basically, you're high for about 20 minutes before either passing out or getting through it, and it gets better after a while. I get out of the bus. On my right is a parking lot in front of a bakery, with a lot of cars. It's normal because there are a lot of government-owned student flats around that block, and that's where most of them park, so I'm not concerned. The road I take is straight from where the bus dropped me off. For the whole walk before my building is to the right, a couple of parking spots in front of it, and a wheelchair slope going to a magnetic door. You need your magnetic student ID to open the door, then a key to the specific door to your building. As I walk by the parking lot, I see movement in the corner of my eye. But since I'm half out of it from pain and meds, I don't turn to look at it. I hear some noise, and I just assume I'm hallucinating it, so I keep on walking. But then, the street lights reflect on a car window, and I don't know why that made me turn around. My brain was catching on to weird stuff. So I briefly look to the side, and I see an old, beat-up white car, pretty long and low to the ground. On the driver's seat is an Algerian man in his mid-50s. The neighborhood being half students, half France-born Algerian, the thing that gives me pause is more the fact that there's someone awake in the front seat of a car at 1 a.m. But again, I'm out of it, so I don't question it. I don't even stop walking because at this point, my only thought is put one foot in front of the other. There you go. You're almost there. You're almost done with the pain. Literally all my attention, my focus, was on putting one foot after the other because of the debilitating pain. I walk past the small roundabout to my left, still going straight, when I hear a car starting. I don't know why that was the thing that slapped me in the face, but suddenly, I was worried. My heart was beating fast, probably half the meds and half the fear. But also, I was well aware that morphine tends to make me paranoid, so I tried to calm down. I see the headlights coming from behind me, drawing a long shadow in front of me. In a second, I run through the calculations. I'm still about 300 meters, 1,000 feet says Google, from my building. Then I need to get my ID out and open the door. A slow, automatic, magnetic door. I can't run. I can barely walk. I'm up to the head in morphine. It's the middle of the night. I'm alone, with no residential building close enough to hear a scream. That's when I start to panic. I'm right to do so. The car catches up to me, slows down to my walking speed. I notice that the man isn't alone in the car anymore. Someone is in the passenger seat, and there's movement in the back, but I don't turn my head because I try to pretend I didn't notice them slowing down. I had my earphones in, with no music as I didn't turn it back on after the bus ride. I just keep walking, hoping with everything I have that they'll leave me alone. I'm trying to walk faster, but I'm in so much pain a few tears fall down. I can't hear that they're calling for my attention, but not what they're saying. Finally, I see the lane going up to my building. I take my backpack off, and I shove my hand down the front pocket, fumbling because my nervous response is shite, thanks meds, and I can't feel my fingers, and I'm shaking like crazy. I can't find my ID. At that point, I'm close to a panic attack. My heart is beating too fast, and I'm feeling close to fainting from the combined pain and terror. I turn to face the wheelchair slope when I see, from the corner of my eye, the car stopping abruptly right next to the slope and the car door slamming open.